Hi there, and welcome to NF Show, the NF Magazine's official weekly podcast. This is episode number 25, Super Turbo, and I'm going to be your host in this episode. My name is Noah. Now, let's look at Evan. Here he is.
Thanks, everyone, for looking at me or just listening to my voice as it gets deeper for this episode.
I just wanted to make sure that I showed you I had a co-host before I potentially went on a 2-minute monologue.
And that is
I've done that. And
that is all you will see of Evan. Let's just brush him underneath the rug for this episode.
Is
that what you're thinking about?
Do you hear something, anybody? So yeah, I get excited during introductions, and then it's a big nosedive after that. And since this is my moment, I want to make sure that you saw Evan before I continued. In this week's episode, we do actually have some cool news stories to talk about, and we have some game impressions on some new games that we haven't talked about in previous weeks. So we will be talking about Guacamelee Super Turbo Championship Edition, and also It'll Do. And probably we've been playing some other games. We'll get into those as well. As for the news side of things, we're going to be talking about a new Zelda on 3DS and Nintendo mysteriously changing course this year with its stance on the EVO video game fighting video game tournaments this summer last year. If you are old and wizened like Evan and I, you may remember Nintendo did something totally different than what they're doing this year. If you don't remember that, we're going to give you recaps. That's okay. Before we get into that, we are going to tell you our video game impressions, what we've been playing, and after the main event, the main topic, we're going to get into your feedback. If you would like to provide any feedback on this show, you're always ecstatically encouraged to leave a comment below the video here over on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/nfmagazine, or guess what? You can also send us an email if you like something more like that and want to have a one-to-one communication with us. That is show@nfmagazine.com, and we are also on Twitter. NF Magazine's official Twitter is @NintendoForce. Mine is @ThisIsNoah, and Evan's is @EvanCampbell. Evan, what would be your dream for the next Zelda game on 3DS? Would you want it to be like A Link Between Worlds, or would you like it to be more like the DS games?
Link Between Worlds. That's pretty easy. I like the DS games, but I'm not sold on the stylus controls. I like actually having buttons in the circle pad or the D-pad to control my Link avatar.
I agree with you, actually. I loved the DS games a lot. I especially loved Spirit Tracks. Great soundtrack, cool story, great dungeons. And I was a little bit saddened, but not totally disappointed to see Link Between Worlds when it was announced, because I had thought, after so many years of seeing the Wind Waker style Link journey across our handheld systems and Zelda games, that we would continue to see that on the 3DS. But no, we actually got a sequel to A Link to the Past. And my opinion, my initial hesitation about that turned into a glowing adoration for that game. So, like Evan, I would not at all mind to see another game designed in the vein of Link Between Worlds. Are we going to get that? We don't know yet, but Miyamoto, during the recent shareholder meeting, dropped a small hint in referring to both the Zelda that we know about that's coming to Wii U, and we were all awestruck by during E3, and another Zelda game on 3DS. He said, "We are gradually changing the structure of the Legend of Zelda series," gradually being an understatement, "and we are preparing to newly evolve the series for Wii U." Yes. In addition to that, we have ideas for Nintendo 3DS, which we have not announced yet. So I hope you will look forward to them. I love, Evan, that they always say that. They say, "Please look forward to this. I hope you will look forward to this." That's like their favorite catchphrase to tack on to things when they talk about mysterious things in the future that they don't want to talk about. Just look forward to it. But all in all, I've heard this kind of description before pretty much every Zelda game. There's a new idea. There's a new concept. Is it going to be a plane? Is it going to be a train? What's the new twist going to be? Is it going to be a boat? And with that in mind, I feel like it's him. My assumption is he's couching that, yes, it is a Link Between Worlds sequel, but it's going to have some kind of new gameplay twist, as every handheld Zelda game has pretty much had. What do you think, Evan?
Well, He talks about earlier, and this was at the shareholders meeting last month for people unfamiliar. He talks about how Link Between Worlds was kind of the halfway point of them involving the series, and basically pointing out how it was a little bit more open world and how you could choose your dungeons and you could rent the items, and how the Wii U game was going to basically be the full evolution of that. What I kind of found curious about it is first that there is another 3DS game coming, because we've now had two Zelda 3DS titles within what 2.5 years or whatever of
Yeah,
its
but one of those was a remake.
exactly. And that would bring up my second point, though, is the fact that Majora's Mask remake has been so heavily hinted at. I think it was even a couple of weeks ago that it was Grezzo, I believe, had on their website, who did the remake of Ocarina of Time, about like a job listing that was like, "Do you want to come work on a Legend?" Strongly hinting that they were doing another Zelda game. So I'm curious. I'm curious if that means Majora's Mask won't be remade and they're actually doing another Link Between Worlds title, because it'd be really cool to see kind of that same formula with maybe, like you were saying, they always have a new twist. Like in a Link Between Worlds, they had the painting. But if we saw another top-down adventure with a different twist from that, and also set in an entirely new world.
Those are some good points. Listeners, I'd love to hear, listeners and viewers out there, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. What would you like the next 3DS Zelda to be? Would you like it to be a further evolution of the Link Between Worlds model, but still within that kind of style? Or something completely different, something that catches all of us off guard and is a new take that we didn't see coming, much as Link Between Worlds kind of was? That said, now let's get into what we've been playing this last week. Evan, it looks like you're still feeling some good indie vibes on your Wii U.
Yes, I definitely am. It's cool to see all of the indie games start to come out. There have been quite a few over the past 2 weeks, and hopefully we continue to see kind of this avalanche of titles that we thought were coming earlier in the year finally come out, especially when we have sort of a summer drought ever since Mario Kart 8. But I should start by saying I misled everyone in saying that I was going to finish Shovel Knight, because I was unable.
Lies!
I was unable to play more Shovel Knight, unfortunately. Everything just ended up being a lot busier. My 4th of July weekend ended up being more packed than I thought it was going to be, but it was a good thing. And
Would
I
you
was
say that it was explosive?
I don't know if I would say that. No.
Oh.
Don't try to put words in my mouth. No, I don't. But I did not get to play more Shovel Knight, so I can't have my definitive thoughts, my definitive critique of Shovel Knight, which I hope
You
to
were
have.
so serious about that, too.
Yeah, I have to give it. People want to know. They're on the edge of their seats, Noah. Just wondering.
I know I am.
But in its place, I have been playing another indie game called It'll Do, which is a really cool game that's inspired by The Legend of Zelda. And by The Legend of Zelda, I mean the original Legend of Zelda. Very top-down, camera perspective. You're going from screen to screen or tile to tile, however you want to try to word that. And you're doing a lot of puzzles and combat. And it's very whimsical. It's very fun. And one of the things that will stick out to you on top of that visual style that I really appreciate, Noah, and I think you as well, is the humor in the game. It riffs a little bit on Legend of Zelda. Like there's one point where you're getting hearts, and who's like a young, maybe you'd say a teenage girl, picks up one of the hearts and starts eating it. And her like fairy fox companion is like, "Why would you just pick up a heart off the ground and start eating it? That is disgusting and revolting." So there's a couple of riffs like on the Zelda, but in general, I think it's just very cleverly written and brings a lot to the table. And one of the reasons I appreciate it even more is the fact that it doesn't just spend all of its time riffing on Legend of Zelda tropes or other game tropes. It's actually just it's a fun thing to read, even if you weren't a video game fan. And I always appreciate people that are able to create comedy without having to do parodies of something else. I always find that a big plus for me. But honestly, it's just a very playful game that I think has some very challenging puzzles, and a lot of them are kind of not even required. It's just to like find like these collectibles and everything. It's not part of the main game. But I found the puzzles fun enough where I would end up doing those, even knowing that the reward was nothing more than just a little card. And then other times they would be challenging enough where I'd spend 5 minutes and just be like, you know what, I don't get this. Maybe I'll come back, or maybe I just won't try it. So I found it did a really good job kind of balancing that, and found the
Hmm.
overall experience very delightful.
And isn't it? It's actually it's is it only like $6 or $7 right now in the eShop?
It's $10.
Is it 10? That's not bad. It's I know this is a game that you've been looking forward to for quite a while. It did come out on other platforms in the previous year, so it unfortunately had a long road before it got to Wii U, but it's great to hear that it has lived up to your expectations, if not surpassed them.
I think it is a great. I mean, it's a short game, so if you're someone that wants to get tons of hours out of a game, maybe that would hold you back. But I think it's a great little kind of mini Zelda-like adventure to experience on Wii U. And I think I love the art style. It has these bold, strong, bold black outlines for the characters, and it's cartoonish. They're kind of playfully between each frame, kind of jumping around a little bit to give it the it has a hand drawn look to kind of enforce that. And I just found it, like I said earlier, just delightful for a few. I think I probably spent about 3 hours overall, and that was doing some of the optional side quest stuff. But I think it's a great way to spend a couple of nights or one evening with your Wii U system.
Another game that has had a bit of a long trip to Wii U but has made a glorious arrival is Guacamelee Super Turbo Championship Edition, which if you're familiar with Guacamelee and are wondering what the difference is between this version and the original that came out a while back, it includes all the DLC that came out for the game previously, and it has a new area and a new boss added in. And I have actually been hungering and hankering for this game for a long time, but have not played it at all until now. And I'm really glad that I waited, because perhaps just having that build up, I suppose I could have been setting myself up for disappointment, but that I just knew it was going to be a great game, and I'm just going in with all these high expectations. And what's great is it actually met those expectations, much like Evan said about It'll Do. Guacamelee has a terrific script. It's got a lot of really funny, clever writing. It doesn't take itself too seriously. And then within the world itself, it's just rife with video game references, and almost all of them are tied to Nintendo. There's definitely a heavy Metroid vibe to everything, because the game is kind of set up like a Metroid game in that you start out with very minimal abilities, and as you start to learn new ways to fight and new types of moves, that increases your ability to explore the world and jump to higher ledges and get to places that you couldn't be before. With that in mind, there's imagery, there's props all throughout the game that are related to Metroid, but it's presented as a joke and it's lighthearted. And then you can see references to Mega Man and Super Mario Brothers and other stuff. That, in combination with the really comical things that the people say in the game, because there's several villages and you can get to talk to lots of people, it's just cool. And from an aesthetic perspective, aside from having that style in mind, it's a really beautiful game. It's incredibly colorful. Each of the areas has really nice, distinct environments and well-drawn vistas with multiple layers parallaxing in the background. And it's set in a fantasy version, I suppose, of Mexico, and you can start to jump back and forth between the land of the living and the land of the dead. And just that every single room, every single area in the game, you can eventually get the ability to actively flip back and forth, and you'll see the entire color palette and the artistic embellishments will flip back and forth, and the music will change as well, and it just adds a nice little twist to it. Now, when you hear a Metroid-style type of game, you think, all right, well, I'm going to have some basic combat abilities, and I'm going to be running left and right, and I'm going to shoot, or kick, and then just keep moving forward. This isn't purely like that. It has a lot more instances of rooms that you'll get into, and the doors come down, kind of like in a Zelda game, actually, and you have to kill a certain amount of monsters of ever-growing strength before you can proceed. And then once you clear that room, you can easily go back and forth between it without an issue. So you have that, and the abilities that you're gaining increase your ability, increase the power of your character and his ability or her ability, because you can play as a man or a woman, uh, to beat the monsters, but also allows you to navigate and do all the platforming in the game better. So you have a really cool presentation from an aesthetic, a musical perspective. The music is terrific, Latin flavored stuff. Uh, Really great script, good gameplay, and it's funny. And just all of those things together, combined with the option to have local co-op play with one extra person, is neat. There's lots of unlockables, and if you're like me and you like to fill in all of your map, even the game is open enough that if you want to just power through, you could probably finish it in 5 to 6 hours, which is common for a lot of downloadable titles. But if you're like me, you're like, oh, I have this new ability, and I can clearly see on the map this thing that was blocked off because I didn't have the power yet to get through there. I'm going to go over there and see. Maybe there's going to be a trinket there that's going to help me increase my health bar or my stamina bar, or maybe it's going to give me more gold so I can buy a new costume or a new upgrade to my moves. There's just so much that you can do in it, and it's been a very satisfying experience. I highly recommend it for you if you've been considering it. And what makes it awesome on the Wii U is that you always have that map, which is so important on the gamepad touchscreen. And if you've played a Metroid game, for instance, if you got the Metroid 4 or Metroid Fusion, I want to call it Metroid 4. If you got that on the Virtual Console, having the ability to have the map available for you on the gamepad is just really, really helps. So, yeah, it's great.
I had two questions in case I missed it. Are you solving puzzles by jumping back and forth between the two worlds, like on a screen?
No, usually the jumping back and forth between dimensions, sometimes you'll come up against enemies and they're in the other dimension. And often you'll come up against enemies there's some enemies that are in one dimension, some that are in the other. They're all attacking you at the same time, and they can all hit you, but you can only hit the ones that are in the dimension that you're attacking. But
so it's combat focused then, jumping between dimensions predominantly.
No, predominantly it's actually platforming based, where in one dimension there's a wall here that you can wall jump against, and in another dimension there's a wall here. And so there's some really tricky sections where you have to wall jump back and forth and flip the dimensions as you're flying through the air just in the nick of time. There are definitely a number of things where you're trying to avoid lava or avoid a wall of spikes or avoid a bunch of gears from grinding you up, and you're just rapidly hopping back and forth and up on platforms and toggling between the dimensions. It definitely has a nice learning curve where it gets more and more challenging, and you become not only more advanced in juggling all your moves and fighting combos, because you get bonus points for killing monsters with style, but also just platforming on the fly using your hair trigger, flipping at the dimensions.
Is it like Mighty Switch Force then? Kind of the blocks moving, and like, is there, because one of the things you complained about in that game was how it kind of stuck for a second before it transitioned to the next thing. So does it do a similar kind of transition, or is it all just on the fly?
It is thankfully instantaneous. It just happens automatically. There's every once in a while there's a small hitch in the music where the music will be a beat or two behind when it flips back and forth if you start flipping back and forth too quickly. But everything else, it is super fast, and it needs to be, because literally if you have these two narrow walls and your character's jumping across, you have less than a second to switch back and forth as you're bouncing back and forth between these walls, and it works flawlessly. There's no pause or hang up like there is in Mighty Switch Force.
And then is all of the combat melee focused, or are there actual projectiles that would be more similar to a Super Metroid game?
It is actually all melee focused, but you end up getting attacks that go much further than your standard punch. So like you might have a super punch, and then your character can do a punch that goes across 2 or 3 times the width that his normal punch would go. And so as you unlock those abilities, that's what they give you the ability to do, is you are able to hit more enemies at once. And you also can build up this Intenso meter, and when you activate that, you become super powerful, your health starts to regenerate, and until the meter wears out. But you can only fill that up by doing combos, so you're constantly trying to fight really well, do combos, fill up your Intenso meter, so that when the game dumps a ton of monsters on you at once, which it does often, it's like, all right, Intenso meter, I'm going to die. Or the bosses, too. The bosses can be pretty tricky and challenging, and don't have the most immediate patterns. There are patterns there, but they can definitely put up a good fight. And so you'll need that intensometer to activate so you can get all your life back before you die and get kicked out and have to start over again.
Hmm. Is it pretty good about the checkpoints and everything, or are there like save rooms?
Yeah,
Or
there are little tables with purple skeleton or purple tablecloths and sugar skulls sitting on them, liberally sprinkled throughout the map. And once you pass it, it's shown on the map. So, and they're usually placed after you've completed something really difficult, and it's like, oh, thank goodness, that was so hard. Or they're right before bosses, so they're really nice and generous about where they're put. And given that the world gets bigger and bigger as you go through it, another nice convenience is warp statues are provided not nearly as frequently as the saving tables, but the warp statues will allow you to quickly go around the map as well.
and is the map? One of the most important things that I think people overlook until you get a terrible one in these types of games is how well the map works. Is it pretty similar to like the newer Metroid games where it just fills in on kind of like a 2D way, very basic grid or
Mm-hmm.
graph paper like way? Is that how the map's presented?
Yeah, it is. It is a very great one-to-one relationship of, and it's 2D and it's flat. You only see a map of the specific area you're in. You don't see the entire world altogether like you would in a Castlevania game. There is
Okay.
an overworld map, and then once you go into a specific area, there's a map specific to there. And what's cool is sometimes you'll pass little areas that have little pathways off that are really tiny or they're really high up, and it fogs out where that would go, but it leaves you a really nice reminder that, hey, this is a place that you didn't go into because you can clearly see this little line going that you should be able to go into, but the map's clearly not finished. So it shows you that, and it also puts color-coded blocks when you run into them that say each of your power moves has a specific color. There's a green one and a blue one and a yellow one, and if there's a block that's green, that means you can only break it with the green move. If you pass an area in the map that has a green block, it actually leaves that green block on the map until you destroy it. So it makes it really easy to know where should I backtrack to. Whereas,
That
for
is
instance, with Metroid, you can pass areas and it's like, I know I should be able to get here, but there are no landmarks left in the map for you to
Yeah, they
get
don't. That sounds really clever. Just for the fact, it just makes me think of two games that I enjoyed but were frustrating. Were the original Lost Winds, which had no map whatsoever, and then there was also is it Shantae Risky's Revenge, the DSi
uh,
game that just has
that
a
game is the worst map.
terrible map. And it's just
Yeah.
like this makes such a big difference. I mean, that's still both are still really good games, but it's like maps can really make or break these type of experiences where you're kind of venturing back and forth and everywhere.
Hmm.
So it excites me that Guacamelee, the developers of that, really thought that out and have seemingly done one of
Hmm.
the best versions according to what you're saying. If I'm going to believe
Yeah.
you, that
Oh
is.
yeah, I promise you'll like it. And what's also cool is you can freely pan it around and you can zoom it in really, really close, and you can also zoom it way, way far out very easily. So yeah, it's very well done.
It's
Done something
great that
nice.
it came to Wii U. It's great to see that game on the
Yeah,
platform.
especially with all the Nintendo love that's in there, all the little nods to classic Nintendo games. If you've been playing Nintendo games for any degree of time, you'll definitely appreciate all those references that are in there.
That's awesome. Well, that's not the only game that you're playing on Wii U, though. It sounds like maybe you got some friends together, some four-player Super Mario World.
Oh,
Wait,
I would love
Super Mario
four-player. I
3D
still
World?
haven't achieved that, but I had three players, and they it was their first time playing Mario 3D World. Like, I'd like to play that game, the Mario game with the cats. I'm like, all right, I know what you're talking about.
Mario plus Cats.
Yes, Mario plus cats. That's exactly what
That's an
Mario plus
easier
cats
name
is.
to remember than Super Mario 3D World. I'm not a big fan of their naming conventions for the past
No,
two.
they're not the best at naming Mario games in the last 10 years, but
Super Mario Galaxy begs to differ, mister.
that is the only exception. The only Mario Galaxy 2, 1 and 2, and Mario Sunshine was okay. All right.
That
Anyways,
was more than 10 years ago. Not to.
that's true. As you get as old as I am, it just all starts to blur together, and the GameCube played Wii games, and I was playing 64 games on my Wii U, and it's just But anyways,
Oh my gosh, you just brought up a sore subject. We can't play 64 games on our Wii U, Noah. They're not on the virtual console yet. Way to just really
rub
bring the.
salt in the wound.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I asked some friends over, and I said, hey, we can play video games. or we can play board games because they're really big into board games. And one of them's not really good at video games, and one of them is really good at video games. And so I
Uh-oh.
thought we would end up going the board game route, but then they requested the Mario game with the cats, and I'm like, all right, cool. You could play as Peach. I brought up, and you could play as Toad. And so we started up the game, and they assumed for whatever reason that I wanted to play as Peach, probably just because I said you could play as Peach. And they're like, do you want to play as Peach? And I'm like, no, I'm playing as Toad now. It's okay. Toad's my new main man.
Was he sitting on your lap while you played, or like does he face you on your coffee table, like assuring you that you're doing a good job?
If I wasn't still walking around everywhere on crutches, I would do that. But that's way too much effort for ambiance right now. So the Toad stays there. He doesn't go anywhere else. He's not touring the world right now while I'm on crutches. But yeah, and so I played as Toad, and we actually went through all of the levels in the first 3 worlds, which really surprised me. It's kind of a marathon session, and even the guy who professed to not be really good at video games and had a hard time playing Mario Kart 8 with us a couple weeks ago did really well. I mean, he was getting first place in some times and some levels, and I did, and then the other guy definitely got a lot of them. And then it just really became a battle over who got to wear the crown. And so we were just trying to sabotage and stomp on each other to get the crown off, or throw the other person just off the level because they had the crown. And once that started happening really liberally, I decided that I was going to play as Peach. and then to add insult to injury, they would try to throw me off, and then I would just kind of float back, and I would verbally taunt them in some rude way that's inappropriate for the show. And then after a while, we'd start up a level, and I knew that it was hard. I remembered that it was a hard level from when I played through them, and I'd say this is going to be a hard one, and then I just pop into my bubble and I just float along as Peach while they did all the hard work, and they would hop up trying to get me, and every once in a while they got me and I'd fall into a bottomless pit. But I'm just like, I'll just watch the common people below do the work for me. I'm just here for the ride as the princess. And it was really fun, and I'm hoping that they come back again and we can get through some more of it, because it's just a great game. I still adore Super Mario 3D World.
Did you have more fun playing multiplayer with it? Because it really does feel like it's built more around multiplayer than single player, at least from my experience playing it solo.
I don't know. I actually think I like it the same. I really loved Super Mario 3D World as a single-player game because I could play all these different characters that had these different abilities, and the level design was so creative, and the music was so great. And I loved how the game wrapped up, and I loved going through all the extra levels, even though some of them are really brutal. It was a great time, and Mario multiplayer games, new Super Mario Brothers games, those are just frustrating to me because you run into each other all the time, and it feels difficult for the sake of being difficult and annoying, and it's hard for me. I know that you've done this successfully with your wife, but it's hard for me to progress through a new Super Mario Brothers game with anybody else on the screen as much as I want to do it. I remember when I first saw it, I'm like, wow, that's such a cool idea. That looks so much fun. And then I realized, no, it's just annoying. What's great about Super Mario 3D World is, yes, you can still run into each other, but there's usually much more space to work in, and people can kind of scatter and go directions that they want, and eventually someone will go down a pipe, or someone will lag behind too far and they'll bubble over, and it's okay. But it feels a lot more satisfying, and it's a lot easier to make progress. And so I feel that the multiplayer in this game is great, but the game by itself also shines really well on its own, just playing a single player. So I'd say it's comparable.
I need to go back and try some of the extra levels, but something about it just didn't click with me like past 3D Mario games. I love Super Mario 3D Land, Super Mario 3D Land, but something about Super Mario 3D World just, it's not like it was a bad taste or anything, but just because of the impressive pedigree by EAD Tokyo, something about it just felt off. And I feel, my main theory is that it feels like it's built more around multiplayer than a single player. Maybe that's just selfishly me, because Galaxy was built around single player, and there were these spectacular moments where you're like shooting across the planet and a volcano's exploding behind you, and moments like that I guess aren't present in 3D World. And I don't know. So, but I'll give it another try for you, Noah.
Maybe it's not as cinematic, I suppose, as Galaxy 1 and 2 were, but I still feel it has a really great design. But I can understand, and I also feel that there's got to be some Mario fatigue in there. And for you
Possibly.
specifically, you've played a lot of the other Mario games with Brandon and had fun with that, and you don't feel that this one is, I'm guessing, not as fun for both of you to play, and so that's probably also got to affect your love of the game as well.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know. I don't know.
That's all that we have for what we've been playing. Now we're going to get into the biggest news of the last week. Nintendo is officially sponsoring EVO, the Fighting Video Game Championship 2014. This year's EVO is being sponsored by Nintendo, whereas last year Nintendo sent its attack lawyers after EVO for including Smash Brothers as a game in the competition, and then
Yeah,
for the
they
second pulled out.
Yeah, they didn't want it streamed. I guess that went against Nintendo's streaming clause a year ago, and they ultimately reversed that decision because not only was Super Smash Bros. Melee back because it's obviously an older game. Most of the games in the fighting game tournament are more recent. There's Ultra Street Fighter 4, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 this year, but no, it was voted in Evo 2013 as like a
Mm-hmm.
charity game. So it was like people donated to see this game, and I think it was within a week of Evo happening, or it may have been a little more time before that. But Nintendo was sending like a cease and desist, like you will
Mm-hmm.
not stream Super Smash Bros. Melee. And the whole point of Evo is getting to watch these incredible fighting game players go at it,
Oh
and
yeah.
and it's free advertising. So it was just this like moment, and thankfully, at the end of the day, Nintendo did come around, but it was just one of these moments
It's
that
like kind of tone deaf.
yeah, exemplified the accusations against Nintendo that they just have no idea what's going on in the current industry, that they're behind the times. I feel like it exemplified that. But here we are this year, and they're one of 20, I think, overall sponsors doing Evo 2014, which is just this huge surprise. And I mean, it makes sense. You have a new Smash Brothers game coming out. They're playing Super Smash Bros. Melee, which is by far the oldest game, and it's one of the biggest. I think there's 1,000 people participating in the Smash
Wow.
Brothers Melee tournament. So it's just like this
Incredible.
fighting game community that has been resurrected. I think the impetus was because of last year at Evo, and now you have the new game. And Nintendo did a great thing with the Super Smash Brothers Invitational. I don't know if you watched any of that and just got to see the reaction of it. But
Mm.
it makes me wonder if we're finally seeing, I think we've touched upon this in the past, is Nintendo slowly making a push into the esports scene with their Smash Brothers franchise.
For right now, I can't help but be a little cynical about this. That it just seems to be fortuitous marketing. That they really, really need Smash Brothers to do well, especially on Wii U, and this is one of the best and most high-profile ways to do that. Really embrace the pro fighting game community or expert level fighting game community, if you like. And it was definitely a highlight for E3, and that's the event at E3 could suggest and be interpreted as Nintendo's not just dabbling in this for marketing purposes, but is actually committing to this. But I need to see an ongoing, continued commitment beyond this year and the next to believe that Nintendo is really embracing this. And there is a chance that Nintendo could, because this year it's all about Melee, and then if the fighting game community feels that Super Smash Bros. For Wii U is up to snuff and echoes the glories of Melee, that game could be a featured game in next year's Evo, and then potentially, who knows where Nintendo could go next. I know that Splatoon, for instance, is not a game that would be featured in Evo, for instance, but it could be featured in some kind of other esports, video game esports tournament, because there are all sorts of things like that where you have Counter-Strike and Dota and all these other things. Splatoon could be Nintendo's foray into that. And I would love to see Nintendo commit to not only the fighting game community, but also just esports in general. They could be doing it, but it also, just what happened last year makes me think, are they really ready? They always seem to be a step or two behind. Are they getting into it? And I'm not sure. I want them to, but I don't know if they will.
Yeah, I think this is. I think you bring up a great point of, is this all just the marketing department at Nintendo of America or somewhere else, and they're being smart and taking advantage of it, but they're not thinking long term enough. I'm hopeful and optimistic that one way we could see if they're serious, if not only sponsoring Evo, but if their Super Smash Brothers Invitational, if they actually built a tournament, sort of like how they do the Pokemon World Championships, if they did something like that with Smash Brothers for Wii U. I mean, it's not going to reach Dota 2 levels, but for people that don't follow esports or out of the scene, Valve is basically has a Dota 2 tournament known as the International, where they have raised more than $10 million for a prize pool for that tournament. So the first place team is going to make $4 million. Or if you're unfamiliar, League of Legends, there's hundreds of thousands of people watching that game almost daily on Twitch. I mean, this is a booming scene and going to become more important, especially for certain genres, but just the game industry as a whole. And I think Nintendo has one franchise, Smash Brothers, that plays to this crowd and plays to this space. And like you said, Splatoon would be another great entry for them to head in that direction. And I hope we see it, because I think it is going to be this next wave of video games, whether it's popularity, whether it's just spreading the word, whether it's people getting engaged, is definitely in the esports scene. But I think one area that Nintendo needs to work on is just Twitch integration with Wii U.
Yes.
We heard Reggie, once again, kind of sounding tone deaf about why would people want to watch people play video games, which was frustrating, and hopefully he regrets how he worded that or whatever. Do you think we'll ever see at least some form of Twitch integration, even if it's just a dedicated Twitch app that's similar to YouTube for the Wii U?
I really don't know. I feel that Mario Kart TV is a very tentative step towards this direction, but it also reflects Nintendo's desire to try to have as much control and ownership over any type of promotional materials that its games can generate, whether they're clamping down on revenues generated from Let's Plays on YouTube or creating something that's insular like Mario Kart TV. I'm not sure. I fear that they will wait until their next system, because that seems for Nintendo to be such a big step forward, and we've seen not a lot of major updates on Wii U's interface, for instance, and its capabilities, that I think they're like, oh, let's put all our eggs into the next basket, and then we'll do it, because we're just not comfortable relinquishing that much control, and people will love us when we finally do it. So that's kind of my vibe on it. I don't think it'll happen until the next system.
Yeah. Well, on a more positive note, I'm hoping that with the Nintendo sponsoring EVO this week, and if people want to watch it, it'll be on Twitch. It's July 11th through 13th, and I'm sure on other streaming services. So I think starting Friday is when the Super Smash Brothers tournament starts. But I hope Nintendo's capitalizes on this and we see a new character reveal or something. They could do a lot of cool things, reveal a new Wii U game mode or whatever, but I think a character reveal would be the big thing to do at this competitive fighting game scene.
I agree. If not then, we need another Nintendo Direct soon. I want one no later than August. And the reason that I bring that up is because I feel like the next big chunk of Smash Brothers information we're going to get is actually going to be at a follow-up Direct. And I foresee that happening in August. That's what my crystal ball is saying to me. And that's when all the characters should be totally revealed, and we should have all the modes revealed and pre-order bonuses announced or something.
We're going to need dates for some titles, too. I don't think we have dates for... We don't have the Wii U date for Super Smash Brothers or Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. So that's going to... It's going to happen. I'm guessing late this month or early August we'll get our Nintendo Direct. But Nintendo, and it may be because of Iwata's unfortunate health issues, the Directs have been much more sporadic this year in general as compared to last.
Very true. Listeners, tell us what you think about the sponsorship of EVO 2014 by Nintendo. I just said something in passive voice. If you're into grammar, that's a big no-no. But I did it anyways, Yoda style. Usually I catch that when I proofread my writing 50 times over, but unfortunately there's no proofreading right here. We're talking without a net lately. But let us know what you think about it. Are you going to be watching Evo on Twitch this week? And do you want Twitch on your Wii U? Maybe Evan and I are the ones that are out of touch with Nintendo gamers, and the majority of you out there are like, who cares? And I don't care if Nintendo sponsors Evo into infinity. All that matters is this year. I don't know. You could have any type of opinion you like. Let us know what that is. You can send them in via email to show@nfmagazine.com, or you can leave comments over on our YouTube channel. And speaking of, it is time to get into your feedback from last week's episode. Take it away, Evan.
Thanks.
We may be having some technical difficulties with Evan's
A
connection.
little hard to be sympathetic here. LOL.
Oh, I'm not sure, Evan, you froze up on me just a moment ago, and
Okay.
I'm not sure if it was just for me or if it was for everyone, but let's pretend that I'm representing the world right now. Would you mind starting over?
Sure.
Because it just froze on you right when I said take it away, Evan, and you said thank, and that was it.
Oh, I like to freeze every once in a while. But the first one is an email from Tare, who says, though it's pretty terrible you guys don't get the cross-platform promotion in the United States. I think she's referring to Squid's Odyssey, which we talked about last week. She goes on and says, I can't help but think of all the games you guys have got over there that were never released in Europe. As such, I find it a little hard to be entirely sympathetic here, with an LOL added. As for Shovel Knight, I don't really enjoy it. There's something to be said for the old style of games and nostalgia, but it just didn't do it for me. Although, speaking of older games, amusingly enough, the only two old school games I got off the eShop for my 3DS are The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario Bros. 3, her favorite Super Mario game. In regard to our top 5 list that we talked about last week, I don't have a top 5 for the Wii U since I don't have one. It's a good reason. Although I really want the Wonderful 101. It's not enough to get the system, so I won't get one until after I get a PlayStation 4, and after Xenoblade Chronicles X, Bayonetta 2, and Zelda are out. Since it is Nintendo, though, I'll give you my top 5 3DS games. Theatrhythm Final Fantasy, Fire Emblem Awakening, Etrian Odyssey 4, Bravely Default, and Pokemon X and/or Y. Still don't have Tamagotchi Life, but hopefully soon. Finally, last of all, I just want to mention something about Child of Light. I was looking forward to it until I saw that not only was there day one DLC to buy, which I'm against to begin with, but the DLC together cost more than the actual game. That is unacceptable to me, and so I decided to boycott the game. Also, people I know who've played Child of Light haven't really liked it and said it's way too short, but not very fun.
Burn that Child of Light down.
Thanks so much, Tara. I love the RPG-centric top 5 3DS games.
Yeah, I would say that Tara's opinion on RPGs is very qualified. Tara's played so many RPGs and played many of them over and over, the ones that are favorites, of course. And so if Tara has recommendations on RPGs, definitely good to listen to them.
Well, she's not the only one that chimes in with Child of Light, so we'll let you come up with your final decision on that game now after we go through all of the feedback. Our next email comes from Andrew P., who says, hey guys, I've been playing a lot of Mario Kart 8 since release, and I just unlocked Mirror Mode. I'm shooting for getting that golden cart to play online. Something happened to me while playing this game, though. After long sessions with Mario Kart 8, using the gamepad began being uncomfortable for my hands. I switched over to the Pro Controller, and I have never looked back. It feels so much better having my hands closer together for that game. I've also been using it to play Guacamelee, which I hope to give you some impressions when I finish the game, and I seem to have the same experience. I still like the gamepad for off-TV play and its ability to switch to Netflix and surf the web, but I feel like the Pro Controller will be my main controller from now on. Have either of you had the same experience with the gamepad?
I actually do not have the Pro controller, so I cannot compare. And the reason why is because I figured that the gamepad, being a Nintendo controller, should be sufficient and comfortable enough for me to play all my Wii U games on. And given that I think the Pro controller is what, $50 or $60, it seemed like an extravagance that my Wii U didn't deserve.
You don't get this Wii U. You will deal with it the way things are. I do use the Pro Controller for Mario Kart 8. I've used it for other games. I definitely have used it while playing Call of Duty. Um, I will use it depending on how the gamepad's implemented. So, like for Shovel Knight, the touchscreen it works really well, and the gamepad may be required. I haven't tried using the Pro Controller, but a game like Guacamelee, I have played Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion with my Pro Controller instead of the gamepad controller, and found it much more comfortable, much better for that type of experience. So you're definitely not the only one. And Noah, I'm sorry that you haven't gotten to experience the glory of the Pro Controller, because I find it very helpful playing virtual console games, and then other games like Guacamelee, 2D platformers, are first-person shooters and everything. I think it helps too how the bumpers and are the ZL, ZR, and the triggers are placed closer together too. You don't have as big of a gap.
Yeah, that is really weird.
But it is more comfortable for Mario Kart 8. I will say that. If you are playing Mario Kart 8 with the gamepad, pro tip that some people may not know is you can also use the Y button as well as the A button for your acceleration. So that may be more comfortable to how you're holding it. Back to Andrew P's email. He says, lastly, I was on vacation last week but wanted to download Guacamelee so I could get home and play it. But unfortunately, Nintendo does not have a way for me to get to the eShop and download titles remotely. I wish that I could download while I'm away, so I don't have to wait for it to download at home. Doesn't Sony have this functionality on PlayStation 4, and do you see Nintendo implementing that in the near future?
Yes, Sony does have that ability. They make it a selling point in some of their commercials. And Microsoft has also said that it is going to start allowing pre-downloading of games, and you can purchase games in Microsoft's online store and it queues up on your system, but in my experience the game's still not installed when I get home. It just shows the game as something that's in my account that I can download and install. But I think Microsoft is moving to change that. Nintendo, we have no idea. And it's a shame because there are definitely a lot of great titles to purchase in the eShop. The funny thing is I was so grateful for the small step forward that I could download titles on my 3DS simultaneous to while also playing it, or I could also just turn my system off and let it download without me having to worry about it.
You mean Wii U?
No, I'm talking about 3DS, because on the DS you couldn't do that.
Oh, I didn't think you could. If you download on 3DS, you have to download it right now or close the system.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it was just the ability to be able to download it when you're not using the system was still a big deal to me.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Forward.
You can download while you're playing another game or whatever.
Which is nice, and that's how I ended up playing Metroid Fusion again last week, because I was waiting for Shovel Knight to download. But yeah, this is one of those small things that could make a big difference that we're not sure why Nintendo hasn't solved it yet, but no clue when or if they will.
Iwata has promised, I think he promised a web version of the eShop around when the Wii U launched,
and
we just haven't seen or heard anything about it, and that's problematic. I mean, Noah and I, talking off air, we talked about how the eShops in general for both 3DS and Wii U, from a visual perspective, haven't gotten an update forever. And I think there was a smartphone app for the eShop promised a year or two ago. And these are areas that they're not going to change Wii U sales or anything right around, but these are the types of interfaces and easy accessibility that we as consumers expect, and it's where Nintendo is failing greatly. And I think it's one of the areas of E3, which it's fine that Nintendo focused on such a games heavy conference and everything, but there's things we talked about cross-platform last week, and we're talking about the web eShop. I mean, these are just features that it's 2014. They should be there. They should have been there yesterday. They should have been there a year ago. We shouldn't be waiting. So I definitely understand where you're coming from, Andrew, and I just find it unacceptable. Let's move on to comments, though, after that. Onto
Evan's angry.
Brighter and greener pastures. We have a short comment from Vinny Black Lodge who says, enjoying Shovel Knight myself. I had to grab it for Nintendo 3DS. So he must be enjoying that 3D parallax going on, which I'm jealous of. I'm sure that looks really cool. Our next comment is from Nintendo Dude GCN. It said, since you guys shared your current top 5 for Wii U, I figure I might as well share mine as well. Number 5, Super Mario 3D World. Number 4, Mario Kart 8. Number 3, Nintendo Land. Number 2, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Number 1, Pikmin 3. I'm extremely surprised that neither of you mentioned Pikmin 3. It's been by far my best experience on Wii U. It's gorgeous visuals and sound along with some awesome gameplay and replay value. Not to mention that controlling and commanding your leaders via the gamepad adds such a great layer of depth. I must say that I have played Pikmin 3, and ultimately I thought it was average. I think I didn't talk about it on this podcast, but back in our Heartcast days, I talked about it extensively, I think, over an episode or two. And I was disappointed with the final couple of levels that were a little more combat-focused than exploring. And I actually used the Wii Remote. I found that to be the ideal situation. But I was also kind of flabbergasted that there wasn't online multiplayer to that title. But Noah, have you picked up Pikmin 3, or did you get that as your free title for Mario Kart 8 or anything?
That's actually the title I believe I'm going to get for the Mario Kart 8 promotion, and that is the reason why I didn't mention it, is because I don't have any experience playing it. And it's also the reason why Wonderful 101 didn't even go into my consideration, because I haven't played it, but they could have been eligible. But I didn't want to recommend a game that I had no experience with, because that would have felt, is the word disingenuous or just lies? More lies. Like Evan saying he was going to finish Shovel Knight this week. Lies.
I can tell you right now, knowing your taste, Wonderful 101 won't be in your top 5.
Wow. Evan and I, we were talking earlier today.
I'm speaking for you now.
We were talking today, we were debating the merits of a game, and Evan just was beside himself that I was defending a game that he didn't like or something, because apparently he feels that he spends so much time defending games that I don't like. But we'll see. We'll see if he's true and he really knows me well once I start playing Wonderful 101.
Oh, I know you will. I know you will. Back to Nintendo Dude, though, he is not finished. He says, in regard to Shovel Knight, I haven't played it yet, but I am strongly considering getting it for Wii U soon. I'm thinking about getting it once I start to tire of Mario Kart 8. We've got a long stretch until fall, so I imagine I'll be hitting the backlog more this summer too. Got my fingers crossed for some virtual console games. I'm ready for Metroid Zero Mission.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about right
yes.
there. Portageurs 1808, had a comment, and here we have another Child of Light impression. Concerning Child of Light, I did get a chance to start it, and I'm liking what I've played so far. The game started out a bit slow for me because the main character, Aurora, starts out with very limited movement and combat abilities. This made early puzzles and fights very trivial. But once I reached the first dungeon, the game started to expand. As should perhaps be expected, the puzzles in this area were more complex than the trivial block pushing required to solve earlier puzzles. Additionally, as I had gained a few levels by this point, the battle system also became more complex. Battles involve a timeline like the ones found in Chrono Trigger and Grandia that is divided into a waiting zone and an action zone. Before the player can choose a command, a playable character's icon must travel through the waiting zone to the action zone. Different commands have different cast times, and as you might expect, more powerful commands take longer to cast. Attacking an enemy while they are in the action zone will knock them back into the waiting zone, and that makes cast time very important. On a final note, the game also appears to feature lots of optional exploration. Early on, I noticed several areas that were out of reach, but which seemed like they were meant to be reached somehow. After the first boss fight, Aurora gains a new ability, which turns out to be the solution to this problem. So even though it started slow for me, it seems like Child of Light is beginning to open up, and I like the direction it's heading.
Thank you very much for providing your thoughts on Child of Light. It's good to have a balance of opinions. People who like it and people who don't.
You don't seem swayed, though, Noah.
These are all points that I've already read reviews before I made my decision.
I will say this for listeners and viewers. Noah researches heavily, goes through many reviews when it comes to game purchases and everything.
Actually, it's kind of a neurosis of mine, and there's very little that I don't research in my personal life and professional life. It's really unfortunate at times. So, yeah.
But ironically enough, when he does purchase a game system, it is a spur of the moment. I was at the store and I just got it, which is the funniest thing. It's these $10 to $15 downloadable games where it's very stressful.
I love you too, Evan.
Kasaki Project writes in with a comment, I agree about using the Pro Controller over the tablet if you can. In Mario Kart 8, I use it and find it more comfortable. I usually prop the gamepad up on my coffee table as a map and glance down if I need to. I've decided to go back and play all the Zeldas I've never finished as a kid, so I'm working through Minish Cap on my Wii U and I'm almost done. Wish I had played it when it came out, but I also enjoyed playing it with the Pro Controller. Though playing it on the gamepad while my girlfriend watches TV works well, too. I'm kind of bummed about no crash. God, I'm saying crash every time. I feel it's crash.
It's a Freudian slip.
It's crash that they don't have cross-platform. It's a crash. I'm kind of bummed about no cross-platform. I'm going to play Link's Awakening in the Oracle games next on my 3DS, and I'd rather play it on the Wii U. But what can you do? I also played Child of Light on my PlayStation 4. You should play it, Noah. I think you guys really like the exploration.
He did not write my name in there. I'm looking at it myself.
He's talking to you. I think you guys would really like the exploration. Also, I liked your Wii U top 5s, but nobody mentioned Wind Waker HD. Seriously, it is so much better than the original version. It's worth playing again and definitely worth playing for the first time. So I'm going to chime in. The reason I haven't put enough time into Wind Waker HD, but I try to make my list that didn't involve any remakes, even though if Wind Waker is supposed to be such a fantastic remake. I was trying to do all original, brand new titles for Wii U.
Yeah. I'm right there with you as well. That would have been my same justification either. I would have felt like I was letting people down to say, well, there aren't any new games that have come out in the last 2 years that are worth trying, but hey, this remake of an old game that was good then and is still good, why don't you buy that again? Play that. I would have felt bad about that recommendation, even though I do know it is a fantastic version of a fantastic Zelda game.
So we may not have explained that. I think we made the caveat that we weren't including any virtual console games, but if we didn't, that was kind of the reason we didn't have any virtual console games, our Wind Waker HD, although there are plenty of great titles to own if you do have a Wii U.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those. But that is all for feedback. Thank you all for such fantastic content and writing and your game impressions. We always love to go through those.
Here, I totally agree, and I can't wait to see what everybody's going to have to say for next week's episode. We look forward to hearing from you. We are now at the end of our episode, unfortunately. Thank you very much for watching us live over on YouTube or watching us after the fact or listening to us in your media players out there, either via iTunes or whatever your favorite audio podcast device of choice is. You can subscribe to us both on iTunes and YouTube. You can like us on YouTube. You can leave us a review on iTunes. I genuinely, and I know this will sound sappy, but my heart was touched by some of the reviews that we received over on iTunes. I really appreciate it. We do read all the content and take it seriously what you all have to say, your recommendations and your thoughts and feedback. So thank you very much for not only taking the time to listen to or watch our show, but also tell us what you think. We will have a special guest host in 2 weeks, as we mentioned prior. The founder and editor-in-chief of NF Magazine, Lucas, will be joining us on July 21st, and we may have a special guest next week too, but we're not entirely sure yet. So you may just get us two schmoes again, or you may have
Schmutz.
a breath of fresh air via a guest host. Until then, please follow us on Twitter. Once again, NF Magazine's official Twitter is at Nintendo Force. Mine is at This Is Noah, and Evan is at Evan Campbell. We hope you all have a fantastic week and play a lot of killer games. Bye-bye.
Bye.